Greetings, podcast listeners. Welcome back to my podcast on LGBTQ education. It's been a while, and although it's not Pride Month or LGBTQ History Month, I did feel as if I let you down in some way during LGBTQ History Month, because honestly I did not post nearly enough. So rather than this episode being to commemorate a specific month, you could just see it as a standalone episode, or an episode to commemorate Heartstopper, which was released on Netflix last week. Anyways, I've had this episode on my mind for a while now, partly because it's something I've done research on for a presentation at school, but also because of some comments I received from a listener after I reposted an article regarding conversion therapy. I won't go into that now, but let's begin by looking at conversion therapy and exactly what it is. So, according to Wikipedia, conversion therapy is a pseudo-scientific practice of attempting to change an individual's sexual orientation or gender identity using psychological or spiritual interventions. Just in case you don't know, pseudo-scientific means consisting of statements, beliefs, or practices that claim to be both scientific and factual, but are incompatible with the scientific method. So let's talk about conversion therapy in the USA firstly. So currently 20 states, including DC, have a state law which bans conversion therapy for minors. 5 states have partial bans for conversion therapy for minors. Meanwhile, there are 3 states in federal judicial circuit with a preliminary injunction which currently prevents the enforcement of conversion therapy bans. Finally, there are 22 states and 4 US territories where there is no state law or policy which bans conversion therapy, even for just minors. There was one case in the USA of a man called McCrae Game, who founded Hope for Wholeness, a faith-based conversion therapy program in South Carolina in 1999. Before founding the program, he himself attended therapy, as he had been struggling with his sexual identity since the age of 18, and grew up in a world where gay was constantly used as a slur, and it still is by some today. However, he reports that he was fired in 2017 after a board member discovered that he continued to watch gay porn, and in 2019, he posted on Facebook that he was gay. So clearly, this can be used as justifiable evidence that conversion therapy, although practiced globally, doesn't actually work because the founder of a conversion therapy program himself didn't even manage to so-called convert his sexual identity through this conversion therapy. Aside from this, another study in the USA highlights the irony of homophobia itself. Participants of the study consisted of a group of homophobic men and a group of non-homophobic men. Their homophobia was determined by the Index of Homophobia, a survey formulated by W. Hudson and W. A. Ricketts in 1980, which calculates a person's level of homophobia. All men were exposed to sexually explicit erotic stimuli consisting of heterosexual, homosexual, and lesbian videotapes, and changes in arousal were monitored. They also completed a questionnaire which measured their level of aggression. This questionnaire found the groups did not differ in levels of aggression. While both groups of men recorded arousal to the heterosexual and female homosexual videos, only the homophobic men showed arousal to male homosexual pornography. This suggests that the people that hold homophobic views may actually experience same-sex attraction and arousal themselves. Homophobic people present a number of arguments to support conversion therapy. One of these is that homosexuality is a natural argument. Now, Biological Exuberance is a scientific research book which is considered to be the first comprehensive account of homosexuality and natural diversity in animals. According to the author's research, he was able to scientifically document homosexuality in more than 450 species of mammals, birds, reptiles, insects, and other animals worldwide. Sexual and gender expression in the animal world displays exuberant variety, including same-sex courtship, pair bonding, sex, and co-parenting, even instances of lifelong homosexual bonding in species that do not have lifelong heterosexual bonding. A well-known example of a homosexual couple within the animal kingdom has been seen in penguins in a few zoos around the world, and homosexual bonding has even been observed in penguins for over 100 years in the wild. Obviously, there are a number of religious arguments presented from people of all different religions, but that is not something that I want to go into in this episode. Moving on, last month I reposted a post on Instagram which was in relation to Malaysia's creation of a mobile application for conversion therapy, expressing my disbelief. My exact words were, "On what planet would this ever work?" I received a large number of messages from someone who has apparently listened to many, if not all, of my LGBTQ podcasts, and has consistently provided me with their feedback and what they believe is wrong with my podcast. I think it's pretty clear what my beliefs are. I believe in equality for LGBTQ plus people. I believe that LGBTQ plus people should be treated with respect and should be treated equally, and that people should have the right to love who they love and be who they want to be. One of the key things which this person said was, I do not know much about conversion therapy, but here's one thing. There have been a few gays in my hometown where my parents are from, and they have taken part in homosexual acts. However, they repented and changed themselves and have gone on to marry women and moved on with their lives. So you say you don't know much about conversion therapy. So let's get into that, shall we? Just a warning, this may trigger those who have experienced or gone through conversion therapy, so please pause the podcast now if the discussion of what conversion therapy entails is a sensitive matter for you personally. The International Rehabilitation Council for Torture Victims refers to conversion therapy as a practice that aims to change, cure, or repair an individual's sexual orientation or gender identity. Although the most common form of conversion therapy is talk therapy, the research that has been carried out has come back to show that in some cases, queer people are put through conversion therapy and are subjected to violence, unnecessary medications, including antipsychotics, antidepressants, anti-anxiety, and hormone injections. The World War II hero Alan Turing went through a kind of conversion therapy which blocked hormones, sterilized him, and caused the growth of breasts. Aside from violence and medicine, electrocution is used. A case of this was reported by the BBC in which Chris, now aged 74, recalls his experience. In an interview with the BBC, he said a photo of a man would pop up, and if you weren't quick enough to flick to the next picture, you would get a hefty electric shock. Then photos of women would pop up with no consequence at all. The theory behind this is that gay people would associate same-sex attraction with pain, and it would supposedly remove any desire or feelings that they had for the same sex. Some other examples of extreme conversion therapy include vomit-inducing drugs, exorcisms, or violent religious rituals, which included beatings, force-feeding and food deprivation, forced nudity, and forced isolation and confinement. Conversion therapy has catastrophic and unimaginable impacts on people's health and results in a much higher rate of suicide, drugs use, homelessness, anxiety, depression, PTSD, and other mental illness in people that have experienced conversion therapy, especially in young people. All of this is exactly what is unimaginable to me, that someone I know would support such practices. When I look at conversion therapy, it has nothing to do with what another person's religious beliefs are, but rather the belief in humanity, love, and care for one another. I cannot personally fathom how someone can just allow and be okay with another person being tortured, or even facing capital execution, just because of whom they love and something that they cannot actually control. This person who messaged me goes on to say, please don't take what I wrote as being offensive. I am merely telling you what is true. Then they tell me, we view homosexuality just as we view drug addiction, paedophilia, alcohol addiction, pornography addiction, etc. This person has tried to speak to me since, not about my podcast, but to see how I am. So this is kind of a message to that person, because they've probably seen what this episode is about, and are listening right now. Seriously, you should know that I'm part of the LGBTQ plus community. I know you know. You know that I'm attracted to men and proud of it, so why would you ever think that I would not be offended by basically telling me that what I am proud of being is just as bad as being addicted to drugs, alcohol, porn, and then worst of all, just as bad as being a pedophile? Just because someone says they don't mean any offense, am I supposed to be fine with what they say? No offense, but I think you are an idiot if you think you can tell me that I am sinful and the equivalent of being a pedophile and then continue to speak to me. All in all, before I end this episode, I'm grateful for each and every one of you who listens to my podcast. I really do hope that it has educated you or been of some help. But if you're going to continue on your homophobic beliefs regardless, I'm not going to speak to you. I can only hope that some way along you would decide to love people for their differences, even if it doesn't align with what you traditionally believe or have been brought up to believe. So, thank you for listening to this episode of my podcast. Please do subscribe if you would like to be notified when the next episode is released. If there are any LGBTQ plus topics you would like me to speak about in the next coming podcast, do not hesitate to let me know. But if it's just to try and insult me again, then don't bother. Anyway, goodbye and see you in the next episode.